Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have another episode in our Spoiler Spotlight series in which I talk about, well, spoilers and tell you what my thoughts are on them. But before that, just a quick reminder to click subscribe if you enjoy my videos. We're well on our way to 1 million subscribers and your support means everything to me. And today we're going to be talking about Hollow Marauder. For 6 colorless and 1 black, it's a creature Spectre Rogue 4/2 with this spell costs 1 colorless less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard, flying, and when Hollow Marauder enters the battlefield, any number of target opponents each discard a card. For each of those opponents who didn't discard a card with mana value 4 or greater, draw a card. So this really stood out at me during spoiler season, and usually commons and uncommons don't particularly do that, but this one just seemed so good that I couldn't really ignore it. So there's a lot going on here and a lot of it is very good. For starters, the discount ability on this is very nice. If you're running a graveyard deck, and there's quite a lot of those in Commander, this can come down for 1 mana. So that would already be a 1 mana 4/2 flyer, which is absolutely fine. Obviously in Commander we're going to need a lot more than that, but still it's very good stats and can come down for very cheap. However, the other stuff that this card does is actually insane. So for starters, it's going to ETB and make each opponent discard a card, and you don't actually need to if you don't want to. So if you're playing against another graveyard deck, for example, you can choose not to have them discard a card, but most of the time you're going to make them discard 1. So that's already becoming really good if you get this down for very cheap. But there's even more to the card. So usually when people discard, they're going to be discarding cheaper stuff, particularly if it's a little bit later into the game where this is going to often hit, or they're going to discard excess lands, stuff like that. This card punishes them for doing that, since if they don't discard a card with mana value 4 or greater, you get to draw a card. That is absolutely crazy, and this means that this can actually be a 7 for 1 if you get to draw 3 cards, they discard 3, and you get the body as well. It's incredibly good, particularly if you can only get it for 1 mana, which you should be if you're putting this in your deck, because you're going to probably be a self-mill deck or something that's playing with the graveyard. So all of that is incredibly good, and I think it's very likely that you at least draw a card off of this. So even if you just draw 1 card, you're getting a 5 for 1 with this, which seems incredibly good. So what kind of decks are going to want to be running this? Well, I had a couple of thoughts about decks that could immediately really like this. Carador Ghost Chieftain was the main one. It just seems so good to be able to recast this from your graveyard, get rid of your opponent's resources every time, and start to draw extra cards. It's also worded in a way that if they don't have any cards in hand, you get to draw no matter what. So this is never truly a dead card, even in the late game when people have no resources. So recasting it with Carador is obviously very good. It's also very good in Henzi Toolbox Torre because you're getting so much value when you cast this for cheap, and it obviously gets the discount from Henzi as well, which is a deck that's also interested in filling its graveyard, so it seems very likely that it's going to be 1 mana in that deck. Playing a 1 mana 4/2 flyer, cracking in for some damage, having everybody discard, and potentially drawing up to 4 cards when you factor in the one from Blitz makes this incredibly solid in that deck. But it's not only these 2 decks. Any deck that's playing around with the graveyard, or is self-milling, or is just looking to even sacrifice stuff. If you're in a low to the ground Aristocrats deck, or an aggro deck that's playing a lot of small creatures that you expect to die, this can just be a pretty good top end. Getting this down for even 3 mana is still quite good. You don't actually need to get the full discount for it to be playable. It just seems very, very good for an uncommon. It does all sorts of different things in multiple different strategies. Finally, there is another kind of deck that might be interested in this, and that is a deck that is running a self-discard or a group slug plan, because if you've got everybody hellbent and they no longer have any cards in hand, you can just play this for very cheap, since you probably have a bunch of creatures in your graveyard, and immediately refuel by drawing 3 cards. That seems like an absolute steal, and this card is just incredible, honestly. I'm going to be picking up quite a few copies of this. I feel like it's so pushed for an uncommon, and I totally look forward to jamming this card into a bunch of decks and getting so much sweet value. So there you have it. Those have been my thoughts on this new spoiler. What do you think though? Do you disagree with me, or do you think I got it right? Let me know in the comment section below. I always make sure to read all of your comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care.